want to tell you a story. It's about a man named Daniel. Every morning for the last 8 months, Daniel has woken up at 5 a.m. He laces up his shoes, steps outside, and runs 5 kilometers. Rain, wind, snow, it doesn't matter. He's out there every day. People admire his consistency. Some even envy it. I wish I had that kind of discipline, they say. But here's what they don't know. Daniel doesn't know why he's doing it anymore. What started as a meaningful journey has slowly turned into a routine of motion. No reflection, no intention, just the ritual. The discipline is still there, but the purpose has vanished. This is what happens when we forget the reason behind the action. We get lost in the doing and forget the being. And I believe this is one of the great dangers of our time. Not laziness, not distraction, but motion without meaning, action without purpose. Because the truth is, consistency without direction can become just another form of stagnation. If you're doing the same thing every day, but you don't know why, you're not moving forward. You're just spinning in place. Let's think about that. We live in a culture that celebrates hustle. We applaud the grind. We idolize the 5 a.m. club, the checklist, the productivity hacks. But here's the uncomfortable truth. None of it matters if it's not tied to something deeper, something that moves you, something that matters. The point of consistency isn't to be busy. The point is to become something, to become someone. And that requires asking a hard question. Why am I doing this? Not why did I start? That's part of it. But why do I continue? Why do I choose this again today? Because the answer can change over time. Our lives evolve, our values deepen. If we don't stop to check in with our why, our actions can become empty repetitions, rituals without meaning. Purpose is what turns routine into growth. Purpose transforms repetition into mastery. I once met a woman named Angela. She was a teacher. 3rd grade, she'd been teaching for over 20 years. Same classroom, same age group, same curriculum. And yet, every single day, she showed up with the same passion she had on day 1. I asked her, how do you stay inspired after all these years? She smiled and said, because I'm not here to teach math. I'm here to teach confidence. Math is just the tool. That's it, that's the why. Her consistency wasn't about the mechanics of teaching, it was about serving something bigger. She had anchored her daily actions to a belief, to a purpose. And because of that, her consistency had energy, it had momentum, it had meaning. When you know your why, your how becomes more powerful. The gym goer doesn't just work out to lose weight, he trains to be around when his daughter walks down the aisle. The entrepreneur doesn't just pitch investors for capital, she's fighting to build a company that gives her community a future. The volunteer doesn't just show up at the shelter every weekend because it's good to do something nice. He shows up because once he needed that same shelter and someone showed up for him. It's purpose that turns routine into resilience. Because there will be days when you don't feel like showing up. Days when the excitement fades. When the goal feels far away. When the voice in your head says, what's the point? On those days you don't need more motivation. You need a reason. You need an anchor, and that's what your why is. It's an anchor. It holds you steady when the waves come. But here's the challenge. We don't often take the time to find it. It's not convenient. It requires introspection. It requires stepping off the treadmill of doing and asking, what matters to me? What impact do I want to create? What legacy am I building? One action at a time. Some people hear the word legacy and think it's reserved for the famous, the wealthy, and the leaders of nations. But legacy is built in the everyday. It's built in the way you speak to your children, in the way you show up for your team, in the way you pursue your craft. And when you link those small, consistent actions to a greater purpose, you're not just living, you're leading. You're not just existing, you're inspiring. And others notice, because consistency rooted in purpose is contagious. When people see you not just showing up, but doing it with clarity and conviction, they start to believe it's possible for them too. Purpose-driven action has a ripple effect. It shifts culture. It raises the bar. It creates momentum, not just for you, but for the people around you. So I want to challenge you today not to do more. Ask more of yourself. Ask more of your actions. What are you building? Who are you becoming? Why are you choosing this path? Because if you can answer that, if you can name your why, then every step forward, no matter how small, becomes significant. This is the power of consistent action, not in the repetition itself, but in the meaning behind the movement. It's not just about showing up, it's about showing up on purpose. So whether you're waking up early to study, practicing your craft after hours, raising your hand when no one else will, or quietly doing the work that nobody sees, ask yourself, what does this stand for? And when you find your answer, don't let it go. Let it guide you. Let it ground you. Let it grow you. Because consistency alone will make you disciplined. But consistency with purpose, that will make you unstoppable. We live in a world that worships the big moment, the loud win, the breakthrough, the dramatic transformation. You know the stories. Someone loses 100 pounds and becomes a fitness icon. Someone starts a company in their garage and becomes a billionaire. Someone writes one tweet and it goes viral, changing their life overnight. But we don't often talk about the part before that moment, the early mornings when no one's watching. The decision to get out of bed when it's still dark. The choice to show up again and again, even when there's no applause. We ignore those moments. Not because they don't matter, but because they're quiet, and quiet doesn't trend. Yet it's in those quiet moments that greatness is born. It's the small steps, the ones that feel too ordinary to matter, that actually build the extraordinary. A mentor once told me, you don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your habits. And habits are small. Habits are boring. Habits are invisible until they aren't. That's the part we forget. The truth is, no one changes their life in a day. They change it through a series of decisions, repeated over time until something shifts, until the tipping point. But that point doesn't come because of one huge leap. It comes because of 1,000 small steps. Let me tell you about Olivia. She was in her mid-30s when she realized she wasn't living the life she wanted. She didn't hate her job, but she didn't love it either. She was exhausted all the time, stuck in routines she didn't even remember choosing. One day, instead of deciding to quit everything and move to Bali, like social media might tell her to, she just decided to drink a glass of water first thing in the morning. That was it. One glass. A small promise to herself. And something changed. It wasn't about hydration, it was about self-respect. It was the first time in years she had prioritized something purely because it made her feel better. That glass of water turned into a 5-minute walk. That walk became 10, then 20. Eventually she was waking up an hour earlier, not because she had to, but because she wanted to, because every small decision reminded her, I have control. She didn't change her life with a grand gesture. She changed her life with one glass of water. This is what we miss when we chase the big moment. We forget that progress is always preceded by 100 invisible victories. Every marathon starts with a decision to take the first step. Every book begins with a single sentence. Every transformation is made up of tiny shifts, consistent, intentional, and often unnoticed. And here's the beauty of it. Small steps are accessible. You don't need to have the perfect plan. You don't need to wait for January 1st. You don't need a new job or more money or better weather. You need a willingness to start even when the step feels insignificant, because the truth is, it's never insignificant. Every step taken with purpose creates momentum. And momentum is a powerful thing. It's not loud, it's not fast, but it compounds, it builds on itself. And eventually it carries you further than motivation ever could. This is why consistency matters. Not because it makes you better overnight, but because it makes you better over time. And time is where trust is built. Trust in yourself, trust in your process, and eventually trust from others. Think about the people you admire most. The mentors, the leaders, the people you look up to. It's not their talent alone that inspires you. It's their persistence, their ability to show up again and again, even when no one's watching. even when no one's clapping. That's what earns respect. That's what builds influence. Not one big win, but a lifetime of small, intentional steps. I once worked with a leader who never missed a Monday morning team meeting. Not once. 10 years. Every Monday. No matter what, he was there, early, prepared, present. No speeches, no theatrics, just consistency. And over time, something happened. His presence became a signal that said, I'm here, I care, I'm invested. People didn't follow him because he had the best ideas. They followed him because he showed up. Small step. Big impact. We don't need more dramatic gestures. We need more people willing to commit to the small things, the daily things, the hard-to-measure things. Because the small things compound, and eventually they change everything. The problem is, small steps don't give us immediate feedback. There's no applause for brushing your teeth every day. No one cheers when you write one paragraph. No one gives you a medal for choosing the salad. And because we don't get immediate results, we assume nothing's happening. But something is happening. Every time you choose the small step, you're casting a vote for the person you want to become. You're shaping your identity, and that identity will shape your future. When people say, I want to change my life, what they usually mean is, I want to become someone I can be proud of. But becoming isn't a one-time decision. It's a million small decisions, a quiet daily vote in the direction of your values. And the beautiful part is the small step is always available right now, today. You don't need to wait for motivation to strike. You just need to take the next step. And then the next. Because when you look back a year from now, you won't remember every action you took, but you'll remember the person you became because of them. So don't wait for the big moment. Don't wait for permission or perfection or certainty. Start with one step. One honest, deliberate action. And let it grow, let it build. Because if you do it long enough, one day, someone will look at you and say, wow, how did you do it? And you'll smile, because you'll know the truth. You didn't do it all at once. You just did one small thing, again and again, until it became something big. There's a trap we've all fallen into. It's the belief that we need to feel like it in order to do something important. That somehow action must follow emotion. That unless we're excited, unless we're inspired, unless we're completely fired up, we can't begin. But the people who actually change things, the ones who quietly move mountains, they've learned something different. They've learned that feelings are fleeting, but choices can be firm. That motivation is a spark, but discipline is a fire. You see, motivation is seductive. It shows up loud. It's energetic, charismatic, dramatic even. Motivation makes promises. It whispers, today's the day, everything changes. And sometimes that's true. But what happens when tomorrow comes and that voice is gone? What happens when the spark dies out and you're left with just you? That's where discipline takes over. Discipline doesn't need a good mood. It doesn't wait for perfect conditions. It doesn't care how you feel or what the weather's like or whether the world noticed your last effort. Discipline shows up again and again, quietly, consistently. It's not romantic, it's not poetic, but it's real and it works. I once met a musician named Carlos, and he played the piano like his soul lived inside the instrument. When I asked him how he got so good, he smiled and said, I practice 2 hours a day, whether I feel like it or not, especially when I don't feel like it. I laughed and asked, so you love practicing? He shook his head, no. I love playing, I love creating, but practicing, not always. That's why I have to choose discipline, because my passion isn't always enough. That hit me. We tend to think passion alone will carry us through, but passion fluctuates. Passion burns bright, but it can also burn out. Discipline is what builds the structure that passion can live inside. Without it, even the most inspired vision fades. We don't rise to the level of our feelings. We rise or fall to the level of our commitments. That's the hard truth. Motivation wants you to wait until you're in the mood. Discipline says, go anyway. Motivation asks, do I feel like it today? Discipline answers, that's not the question. We have this myth that people who accomplish great things always feel driven, that they're somehow built differently. But the opposite is true. They've simply made peace with the fact that progress doesn't always feel good. Growth is often uncomfortable. And showing up without motivation, that's part of the deal. Think about an athlete training at 5 a.m. when their body aches, showing up for film review when they'd rather sleep, eating clean when everyone else is celebrating. That's not motivation, that's discipline. Think about a parent who wakes up night after night to care for a crying child. That's not because they're inspired by a vision board, that's because they've made a commitment. That's discipline. And think about the quiet worker who no one notices, but who shows up early, pays attention to the details, and holds the line even when no one's looking. That person, that's who companies are built on. That's who teammates trust. That's the backbone of progress. We don't remember the days when it was easy. We remember the days when it was hard, and we chose to act anyway. That's when identity is formed. That's when character is built. That's when you look back and say, that day, that was the turning point. Not because you were inspired, but because you were disciplined. And the funny thing is, the more you act with discipline, the less you have to rely on motivation. Because discipline builds momentum. And momentum builds confidence. And confidence changes everything. There's something deeply empowering about knowing that you don't have to wait to feel ready, that you can act now, that you are capable of showing up even when your emotions aren't cooperating. You stop being a prisoner to your moods, and you start becoming the author of your habits. And here's the beautiful irony. When you practice discipline long enough, motivation actually returns. Not as a requirement, but as a bonus. Suddenly you do feel inspired because you're proud of who you're becoming. You don't need hype anymore. You have something stronger. You have integrity. Discipline doesn't mean being rigid or robotic. It means being rooted, grounded in your values, anchored to your why. When you know who you are and what you stand for, you don't have to renegotiate with yourself every morning. You simply act in alignment. And it's not about perfection, it's about persistence. You'll miss a day, you'll slip, we all do. But discipline says, start again. Not out of guilt, not out of shame, but because that's what you've committed to. Because you've decided that the kind of person you want to be is someone who shows up. There's a quote I once heard, discipline is just remembering what you want. And that's the essence of it. When you're tired, when you're discouraged, when motivation is nowhere to be found, remember what you want. Remember why you started. Remember who you're becoming. Because every disciplined choice is a vote for your future. Every time you take action without waiting for the perfect feeling, you're saying to the world and to yourself, this matters. I matter. That's where confidence comes from. Not from talent, not from hype, but from evidence. The quiet evidence you collect each day you do the work, it adds up. And one day, you'll look back and realize you didn't build your life on motivation. You built it on discipline. So if you don't feel ready today, that's okay. Show up anyway. If you're tired, show up anyway. If you're discouraged, show up anyway. Because that's what discipline does. It shows up. And that's what changes everything. Trust doesn't appear overnight. It isn't built in one gesture or sealed with one handshake. Trust is built the way mountains rise, slowly, layer by layer. It's built in the quiet moments, the ordinary days, the repeated choices that say, you can count on me. And not just when it's easy, but especially when it's hard. We all want trust in our relationships, in our teams, in ourselves. But many of us misunderstand how it's created. We think trust comes from intensity. One big apology, one big performance, one grand gesture to prove our commitment. But it doesn't work that way. Trust isn't built in the dramatic moments, it's built in the consistent ones. Think about the people you trust the most. It's not the friend who throws you a birthday party once every 5 years. It's the one who checks in when no one else does. The one who listens. The one who remembers what matters to you. Not once, not occasionally, but over and over again. That's consistency. And consistency is the foundation of trust. And it's not just about others, it's also about you. Trust in yourself works the same way. A lot of people struggle with self-confidence, and they think the answer is to just believe in themselves more. But belief doesn't appear out of thin air. Confidence isn't something you affirm into existence, it's something you earn by keeping promises to yourself. When you say you'll do something and you do it, not once, but repeatedly, you start to believe your own words. You start to trust your own voice. And that trust becomes confidence, not the loud kind, not the chest-pounding kind, but the quiet kind, the kind that says, I've done this before, I can do it again. But when you constantly break promises to yourself, when you say you'll start and you don't, something subtle and damaging begins to happen. If you stop trusting your own intentions, and if you can't rely on you, who can you rely on? There's a man I once worked with, David. He was brilliant, talented, visionary, but he was also unreliable. Not because he didn't care, but because he didn't follow through. 1 week he was all in, fired up, big plans, big energy, and the next, gone, unavailable, burned out. And eventually people stopped listening to his enthusiasm, not because it wasn't real, but because it wasn't dependable. His inconsistency made it hard to trust him. But then something changed. He didn't try to do everything all at once. He just committed to one small thing, showing up for his team's Monday meeting. No excuses, no reschedules, just that. One anchor point of consistency. And slowly, people noticed his energy didn't come in bursts anymore. It came in rhythm, steady, predictable, grounded. And that changed everything. Not just how others saw him, but how he saw himself. We all want to be seen as reliable, trustworthy, solid. But that doesn't come from what we say, it comes from what we do, repeatedly. There's something deeply reassuring about someone who shows up consistently. It creates psychological safety. It says, I'm here, you don't have to worry. And in a world full of uncertainty, that's rare. That's valuable. And yes, consistency is hard. Life gets messy. Emotions shift, schedules overflow. But that's what makes consistency powerful. Not that it's easy, but that it's a choice, a commitment, a discipline. And it doesn't have to be daily, it just has to be dependable. You don't have to be perfect, you just have to be predictable in the ways that matter. Predictable in your values, predictable in your integrity, predictable in the way you think of a leader. The best ones aren't the ones who always have the right answer. They're the ones whose people know what to expect. They're calm when others panic, honest when things get messy, present even when things go wrong. They don't disappear when it's inconvenient. They don't show up only when it benefits them. Their consistency becomes a kind of emotional scaffolding for the entire team. It says, we may not know what's coming next, but we know how we'll respond. That's leadership. Not control, not charisma, but trust earned through steady presence. And the same goes for parenting. Children don't need perfection, they need consistency. They need to know that love doesn't vanish after a bad grade or a tantrum. That rules don't change depending on your mood. That they can trust you to show up again and again, even when they push you away. Especially then. And yes, it's exhausting. Consistency requires resilience. It means doing the right thing not once but 100 times, and often without recognition. But that's what makes it matter. Because anyone can be impressive once. The real work is being reliable. And here's the part we forget. Consistency doesn't only build trust in others, it inspires them. When people see you showing up, sticking with your values, doing the work day after day, they begin to believe they can too. Your consistency gives them permission to be consistent. It raises the standard, not through pressure, but through example. Because in the end, trust is the currency of human connection. And consistency is how we earn it. So don't underestimate the power of showing up. Don't overlook the impact of doing what you said you would do, even if no one notices at first, especially then. Because over time, people will notice. And more importantly, you'll notice. You'll look back and realize you became trustworthy by being consistent. Not perfect, just dependable. And that made all the difference. So if you want to build something that lasts, a relationship, a team, a life, don't just ask, what do I want to achieve? Ask, what can I commit to again and again, no matter what? Because that commitment, repeated over time, becomes your reputation. And your reputation becomes your legacy. And the foundation of that legacy, it's not talent, it's not inspiration, it's consistency. We all want results. In business, in health, in relationships, in life, we chase results the way a runner chases the finish line. We look for the outcomes, the promotions, the revenue, the accolades, the milestones. And there's nothing wrong with that. Results matter, they're measurable, they're motivating, they're validating. But results don't show up because we demand them. They show up because of what we do, day in and day out, when no one is watching. Results are not born from ambition alone. They are born from ritual. There's something powerful about ritual. It's not just repetition, it's intentional repetition. A decision to create rhythm where there could be chaos. A choice to embed values into action. Rituals are not about being robotic, they're about being rooted. Rooted in what matters most. Because when we create rituals, consistent, purposeful practices, we create the conditions where results can grow. Think about a musician. The ritual is the scales they practice every morning, not the performance at night. A writer's ritual is the hour they sit at their desk, even when no words come, not the bestseller list. A leader's ritual is the one-on-one check-ins, the consistent communication, the quiet preparation, not the speech on stage. You don't get to the result unless you've honored the ritual. It's easy to admire someone's outcome and miss the process that led them there. You know, we see the championship, but not the workouts. We see the six-figure business, but not the early mornings and lonely decisions. We see the joyful marriage, but not the years of intentional communication. And that's dangerous because it convinces us that results are about talent or timing or luck. But more often they're about discipline, about doing the right things regularly enough that progress becomes inevitable. A friend of mine started his own company 3 years ago. When I asked what made the biggest difference in getting it off the ground, he didn't mention capital, marketing, or connections. He said, I had one ritual. Every morning before anything else, I wrote one thank you email to a customer, a partner, a mentor, someone. I did that for a year. It kept me grateful, it kept me connected, and it kept me grounded. That wasn't strategy, that was ritual. And from it, results came. Relationships strengthened, referrals grew, trust deepened, all from a small, consistent act. The beauty of ritual is that it anchors us. In a world that's constantly changing, rituals are steady. They give us structure in uncertainty. They give us motion when motivation is missing. They remind us who we are and who we're becoming. When things fall apart, we fall back on what we practice. So the question becomes, what are you practicing? Because whether you know it or not, you already have rituals. They may not be intentional, they may not be productive, but they're there. Hitting snooze 3 times? That's a ritual. Scrolling before bed? Ritual. Avoiding hard conversations until they become crises? Also a ritual. The question isn't whether we have rituals. It's whether our rituals are serving us. Intentional rituals are different. They're chosen, not defaulted. They reflect our values, not our impulses. And when done consistently, they shift not only our behavior, but our identity. They say, this is who I am. This is what matters. This is how I live. One of the most transformational leaders I've ever met had a simple ritual. And every day, he would pause, write down 3 things he did well and 1 thing he wanted to do better. And that was it. 5 minutes, no technology, no noise, just reflection. He said it kept him honest. It reminded him to celebrate progress, but never stop improving. That ritual didn't make headlines, but it shaped him. It made him the kind of person people wanted to follow, and over time, the results followed. Because here's the truth. We don't control results. We influence them, we guide them, we pursue them, but we don't control them. What we do control is the process, the standard we hold ourselves to every day. And when we focus on that, on the ritual, not just the result, something incredible happens. We start to trust ourselves. We start to gain momentum. We start to make progress that lasts. There's a story about a coach who never told his team to win. He didn't put pressure on the scoreboard. He said, we will win if we do the right things every day, every play, every practice. Focus on execution. Focus on the fundamentals. The results will take care of themselves. And they did. Not because the coach chased results, but because he taught his team to honor the process. That's what rituals do. In our lives, we spend so much energy setting goals. Lose 10 pounds, write a book, double the revenue, and that's fine. But goals don't get you there, rituals do. Goals are outcomes, rituals are inputs. If you want better outcomes, change your inputs. Build rituals that reflect the kind of person you want to become. Want to be healthy? Build a ritual around movement, hydration, sleep. Not just the number on the scale. Want to be creative? Build a ritual around curiosity, observation, daily output, not just waiting for inspiration. Want to lead better? Build a ritual around listening, serving, investing in others. Not just hitting quarterly numbers. Because the more consistent your rituals, the more inevitable your results. And yes, it takes time, it takes patience. There's no overnight reward for ritual. But there's a quiet power in knowing that you're showing up again and again in alignment with your values. That's where trust begins, that's where growth begins, and ultimately that's where success begins. So if you want to change your life, don't start with results, start with rhythm, start with ritual, start with one small thing you can do every day with intention, not because it guarantees anything, but because it prepares you for everything. And when the world gets noisy, when doubt creeps in, when motivation fades, your rituals will remain. Quiet, steady, grounding. They will carry you when inspiration doesn't. And one day, the results will come, not as a surprise, but as a reflection of everything you practiced, because the results always follow the rituals.